My name is Don Dickson, and I want to thank you for joining me for another edition of our structure fishing workshop. Today we're looking into natural lakes. And I want to break those natural lake discussions down into three separate categories. Even though most all natural lakes are the same and they offer the same types of situations, there are some distinct differences. For instance, in a Florida type lake versus a natural lake in northern Minnesota. There are some differences in that lake in Minnesota, that natural glacier lake in Minnesota that maybe has one deep water hole, 2 or 3 structures, and let's say Lake Ontario. They're natural lakes, they're formed by the glacier, but they're different when it comes to going about your fishing. You have to sort of distinguish these differences. So I break my discussion. This is in even Buck Perry stuff. This is just Don Dickson stuff. Because of my experience in all of the above, I break my discussions down when it comes to natural lakes into 3 different, distinctly different types. First, we have the natural lakes, like in Minnesota and Michigan and upstate New York and Maine and all of the northern tier of the country. We have these glacier natural lakes that all would be fished exactly in the same way. Our keys to fishing all of these lakes, whether it's the Finger Lakes in New York or whether it's upstate in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, or whether it's in Minnesota or Wisconsin, we fish all these lakes the same way with the same keys. So that's one grouping of natural lakes. Now next, I separate the Florida type lakes. I actually put them in a completely different category. It's a natural lake, but it's completely different the way we approach our fishing here than fishing the Finger Lakes in New York or in upstate Minnesota, fishing one of the 10,000 natural lakes up there. We approach it a little bit differently. So I'm going to separate that discussion. And then we also have the Great Lakes, again, formed by the glacier. They're glacier natural lakes, but we can't fish Lake Michigan. We can't fish Ontario. We can't fish Lake Erie the same way I fish a Florida type lake. We can't fish it the same way I fish the natural lakes up in upper Minnesota and the northern tier natural glacier lakes that exist all over the northern parts of our country. We can't fish them the same way. So I have to separate it. I'm going to talk about the Great Lakes. I'm going to talk about Florida type lakes. And then I'm going to talk about the majority of the natural lakes that we encounter mostly in this country. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So whether you live in an upstate Minnesota or you fish up there, I know a lot of my friends from Illinois, they go up there all the time. They go out of state and do a lot of their fishing in Minnesota. They do a lot of their fishing in Wisconsin. They go and do a lot of their fishing in Canada. Natural lakes. What's the key? And here I'm going to boil it down for you because we don't have to have 10,000 different ways of approaching these bodies of water. They're all the same. So as you pull out your map and you're looking at your natural lake you're going to go fish in upstate New York or upstate Minnesota, wherever it is, and you're looking at that lake, what's the first thing I look for? The first thing I look for is deep water. Where are my deep water holes? Because deep water holes, that's the home of the fish. I have to identify where in this natural lake my fish are. They're in the deepest water in the lake, the deepest water in an area of a lake, or the deepest water available. And we'll be talking more and more about that. But in our glacier lakes up north, the ones we're talking about today, they will all have at least one deep water hole. Some will have 2, some will have 3, some will have 10. So once we've pinpointed our deep water holes, whether there's one or whether there's multiple, we've established there's our fish. Now the next question that comes up, of course, is when these fish become active in this area of your natural lake, which way are they going to go? And if you've been with me for over the last 12 months, you'll know the answer to that is structure. Where is my structure in relationship to that deep water hole? That's all I have to identify now, and I'm ready to get fishing. Where's my structure in relationship to that deep water hole? Now, if you have multiple deep water holes in the lake, let's say you have 3 or 4, I'm going to show you some pictures of natural lakes. One that has just one deep water hole and some over here. I just add a few in here that have multiple deep water holes. I have to establish the structure in each one of these areas of the lake that are in relationship to the deep water hole in that area of the lake. Once I've done that, I know exactly where to go catch fish in my natural lake. Where are my deep water holes? Where's the structure in relationship to those holes? That's it. It's not that hard. Now, in our study on structure last summer, I pointed out that in these natural lakes that we're talking about today, we really have only a few different types of structure that exist. There's not 17. So let's break it down. What structures am I looking for in my natural lake? Here's how it breaks down. We have bars, we have humps, and we have saddles. If you missed that discussion, a saddle is simply an underwater hump that has deep water only on 2 sides as opposed to deep water on 4 sides. So in natural lakes, that's really what we have. We have bars, humps, and saddles. So I not only know where my fish are, I've located my deep water hole. Now I have to find some bars and or some humps, sometimes there's both, connected to each other. Bars, humps, and or saddles in relationship to that deep water hole, and I can go fishing. Now I know what to do, what I'm looking for. So then when I get out there in that natural lake and identify that deep water hole that I saw on the map, then I know that I'm looking for that bar or I'm looking for that hump in relationship to that hole that I have already identified on the map. So you turn your depth sounder on, you get to the spot, then you do a little detail, that's another study, do a detail on that structure and go to fishing. And you start catching fish. It's really that simple. Now, there's one other thing before we leave this type of natural lake, which is 95% of the natural lakes in this country. Before we leave this discussion, I have to mention another real key in fishing these lakes. Sometimes you might be fishing a lake that you have no map. One's not available if you're a natural lake. You just don't know where your deep water hole is. You don't know where the structure is. You have to go out and find it. The quickest way to finding your deep water holes and your structure and your fish is to jump on the weed line. So, if you didn't have any map and you had no knowledge of the lake, simply take your depth sounder, leave the boat ramp, go out, and wherever that weed line breaks off, whatever the depth, 8 feet, 10 feet, 14 feet, whatever it is, start following that weed line. Normally what I would do is I'd have a lure in the water. If the weed line was 10 feet, I'd have a short line 200 spoon plug in the water, fishing the base of that weed line, and I'd just start up the lake. You'll be following that weed line, all of a sudden that weed line will turn you way out into the middle of the lake and then turn back again, come back in towards the shoreline. You've just found a bar. If it's 10 feet here and 10 feet way out there and 10 feet in over there, you found yourself a bar. The weed line showed it to you. And a lot of times you'll say, well, how can I find a hump like that? Well, if you have a calm day and you're looking out over natural lakes, you'll be surprised how many times you'll see the weeds coming pretty close to the top, within a foot or so of the surface, create a different coloration than the rest of the surrounding water. And you'll be one of the best humps I ever found in upstate New York. I looked out and I saw a water coloration difference. I went to it. It was the most productive hump, probably the most productive structure in the entire lake. Just my visual, knowing that I was looking for something like that. As soon as I saw it, I recognized it. Now, A lot of times when you find that bar, your weed line points out a bar, you go way out, and then you start doing a detailed map of that bar, you'll find, in many cases, you'll find a hump out off of that bar in relationship to that bar. Many times a deep water hump in relationship connected to your bar. So now you found two structures. One that'll produce in questionable weather conditions, the deep water hump. And the other, when you have good movements, the bar, you found it simply by following the weed line, and it pointed it out to you. So when I'm fishing a natural lake, even if I have a map, and I know I'm heading to a spot that I've identified on the map, which is maybe, let's say, a mile down the lake from the boat ramp, I will never just drive down to it. I just don't do that. I put a lure on, see my outer edge of the weed line, put a lure on and troll my way down there. I can't tell you how many times on the way to the spot where I was heading, bang, I hit a nice fish. And then I go to working it out, ask myself the question, why did I catch that fish where I caught him? How did he get to where I just caught him? I didn't see anything on the map that indicated it, but there must be something here, otherwise that fish wouldn't have been there. And then you go to work a little bit, do a little detail, and all of a sudden you find a structure you didn't know existed. That's happened thousands of times to me, I'm telling you. So when you go to your natural lake, get on that weed line, start trolling. On your way to that number one spot that you've identified on the map. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate you being here today. And I think you've all probably noticed we pushed over about 135 or 40,000 views, and we also have pushed past our mark of 1,000 subscribers. So I'm real thankful for each and every one of you. Thanks for being with me. Hope you're learning a little something. And the next time we get together, I'm going to talk about the Great Lakes and Florida type lakes, and then we'll move on from there into our reservoir discussion. So with all that being said, thanks for being with me today. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do it. We appreciate it, and we'll see you the next time.